Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior. It is expected to sell in excess of 65 million US at Sotheby's, London, June 29th, with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
We're speaking with Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. Plus, he's the most prominent political commentator in Lions Bay, BC. Welcome back to the Goddard Report, Rafe.
Oh, always good to be here, Jim.
The Brexit vote, were you surprised that they decided that they did not want to be part of the European Union anymore?
No, I wasn't really. I spent a lot of time going to Great Britain over the years, and a lot of time in pubs, and a lot of time, fishing and eating with people after, in those kind of things where you really meet people. And there has been a pretty strong resentment to the European Union going back a long way. It doesn't always manifest itself in, letters to the editor and that sort of stuff. A lot of people, will, tell a pollster one thing, but do another. But the one thing that's been sort of steady, and I would always guess it around 55, 60%. They just didn't like the fact that Europe was telling them what to do. Everywhere they looked, the size of the hose they were using in the backyard had to pass an EU standard or something like that, and it was a constant irritation to them. And I think when it got down to they could see what it really meant, and incidentally, I'm sorry they left. Don't misunderstand me. I think they made a big mistake in leaving overall. But once they saw that the pound was under threat, and it wouldn't be long, I suppose, before Parliament would be under threat. It would all be done in Brussels or wherever, and I think people just started to really, it got to them. And I know that during the campaign, when Wendy, who's a pretty astute political person, I would talk, I'd say, I think they're going to leave, and it's too bad, but Cameron isn't making any headway, and the Labour guy isn't making any headway. It doesn't matter. They're talking to the guys in the pubs that are saying, to hell with it. I'm sick and tired. Don't tell me I'm going to lose money. I just want to go and have a beer and be a Brit again. And they're very, very proud people, don't forget, as you know, Jim. And that's buried very deep in them. And one of the things I always found so interesting about Britain is you'd go into a pub where you think that a pub in not particularly a wealthy area, and they'd be singing Land of Hope and Glory and all the things that the elite sing. And the class system has lasted there forever and a day. Every time somebody predicts it's going to go, it just carries on. So they are very comfortable in their skin, and they just don't like the idea of losing more and more of that. And as I say, I think they're in for a hell of a lot of trouble. If they were going to do this, they should have done it 20 years ago, but they didn't. They've done it now, and they're going to have to find a way out.
I know economically it doesn't make sense, but people don't usually vote economics. They vote with their hearts.
Of course, that's it, right. They vote with their gut and their heart, and this is just the way it is. I have no doubt about that at all, that this was going to turn out this way. Well, I shouldn't say I had no doubt. I mean, I knew it was going to be close. Everybody did. But I wasn't surprised, let's put it that way. I've been a Brit fan for a long time, and been very close to a lot of people over there, and I know how they feel.
Well, World War II was about they didn't feel that somebody in Germany or anybody else in Europe should be calling the shots in Britain.
No, I think that's right, and that there's a lot of that sort of Churchillian stuff comes to the surface at times like this, you know. And incidentally, Winston Churchill has always been credited with the man that got the EU started. Well, that's kind of an interesting story. In a speech in Zurich in 1948, he did talk about a United States of Europe. He wanted France and Germany to get together. He helped father the Steel Coal Pact that later on became the center of the common market. All those things. But everybody, when they're talking about that, neglects a couple of lines in his speech. And those lines said, essentially, but this is not for Britain. Britain is with the English-speaking world. But we will, along with the United States, and I'm sure the Soviet Union, do everything we can to make what might be perhaps be called the United States of Europe and make it succeed. But people, because, you know, everybody likes to have him on side when it comes to one of these things. Well, he wasn't on side at all. I think probably he recognized that Britain was not very good at staying in Europe. And, you know, another thing people don't remember, these memories die very, very hard indeed. And not just the first two wars, but, you know, France hasn't been a big pal of Britain for a long, long time. And before Hitler, there was Napoleon. I mean, the Brits have always had somebody over there they've had to watch and had to beat back and so on. So you don't have any groundswell or deep feeling of love and affection for anybody there. So they haven't got anybody they can say, well, those guys are our pals, except Portugal, I guess, and that's not really very helpful. So I think without that, without a kind of a wellspring of goodwill between the various countries, I think Britain is just, it's not ever really part of Europe, and it doesn't want to be.
Now, Scotland voted very strongly to remain part of the EU, and again, they say this should see another referendum there about splitting from Great Britain and going it on their own and being, you know, remaining with the EU.
Well, you know, you've got to understand that, that didn't mean that way. It sounded like I was lecturing. But you've got to remember that Scotland is a very different kettle of fish. I think 1707 was when they all got together, and that's 300 and some odd years ago now. And they've been sailing along, fighting battles together and all those sorts of things and living together. But the Scots have never stopped being Scots. And in a book I wrote some time ago, I had a chapter which said, ethnicity never dies. And I don't think it ever does. And the Scots have always had a feeling that they wanted to be independent. Now, they're very practical people. They shared the island with Britain. They'd had horrendous fights over the centuries and lost as many as they won, and they knew that it was not going to be easy to stay separate, so they joined. But deep down inside, the Scots have always been Scots. Now, it might have been different if Scotland did not feel that it was better off in the EU. If they felt like the other Brits did, that they had no friends over there and they didn't want to go, et cetera, et cetera. Again, you've got to go back to your history. Scotland has a 2,000-year friendship alliance, et cetera, with France, the old alliance, and those sort of things, Jim, you think, oh, God, it's 2016. They don't go away. It's like things in your own family. You never saw them happen. You never really know about them, but there's something in there that's in your genes. You know that you're a Goddard, and the Goddards don't speak to somebody, or whatever the hell it may be. And the Scots have had that feeling for a long time. They are not part of Europe, but they will stay in Europe because they'll go in Europe because they've got somebody who's always been a friend, and they think will be a friend again. I think that's wistful thinking. I wouldn't want to think that my future depended on having France on my side, but that's the thing that goes on in their mind, and they're independent people, and as a Scot, I know why, and I understand their feeling, but they're not going to stay in Britain if it's not going to do them any good.
Is this going to stir up independence movements again all over the world, including one right now on Vancouver Island? They want to be their own province.
Well, yes, I know, and it will, and it's part of the copycat theory that always comes from these things, but yeah, I think it's more than that. I think we talked about this before. There is a definite divide between the haves and the have-nots in the world right now, and the have-nots are getting excuse me, a little tired of being pushed around, having political rights swamped by people that don't have as many votes, having money industrialists run things. I wrote something a few months ago, or maybe longer than that, saying, people talk about, well, if you want to have a change in the law, go to Parliament. That's the democratic way to do it. Except most people with any brains know that Parliament doesn't have their kind in there. It has the wealthy kind in there, or the people that will yield to the wealthy if they don't have it themselves, and they'll go on the side they think their bread's buttered on. So you're not going to get any changes. And this is, I think, slowly seeping in. The environmental movement probably has brought this out more than anything else, because people who were environmentalists before were all of the left. They never were in power, so they're never used to it. So it didn't cost them anything. I don't mean that unkindly, because they fought very hard, but it didn't cost them anything to be environmentalists. They weren't going to lose anything from them. But all of a sudden, people from far different backgrounds became environmentalists. And they began to realize, wait a minute, we went to our MLA or MP and talked about this bill or that bill, and they didn't do anything, and they won't do anything. And I think people, and it's a slow process, it doesn't happen overnight, but people are slowly recognizing that the people that are running the world are not their kind of people. It's going to take a long time, I guess, for that to fully catch up, but I think you're seeing examples of it now, and I think the Brexit was just one of them.
Of course, revolutions have happened because of that. Is that why they're militarizing the police? They're scared people will rise up?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. The establishment has always been very good at sensing when they're in trouble, but they've never been very good at doing anything to prevent it, and it just is a matter of time. But, I think one of the things that I got pretty interested in was civil disobedience, because, as you know, the communities in which I live, communities being all along Howe Sound, are to a person opposed to this Squamish LNG. And I find people in this conservative area that I live in, people that usually would never even incur a parking ticket, are having seminars for civil disobedience. So there is a change in attitude. People no longer feel glued to their past or their past principles. They're saying, wait a minute, to hell with it. What's the point? I don't want that thing there, and I want it for my kids. I don't want it for my whole area. I don't want ships bumping into rocks and exploding and that sort of stuff. Nobody is going to stop me. The NDP are no help to me, and my usual friends are no help to me. By God, I'm just going to do what other people do. I'm going to make a fuss and make trouble. And this is a brand new thing. It really is. I've been in the political world for some time, and I've been a minister of environment. I've never seen anything remotely like this. I've seen angry people who are, going to lose their waterfront on a lake or something like that. But I've never seen communities like Squamish and Lions Bay and Horseshoe Bay and West Vancouver and Grantham's Landing and Gibson's Landing and so on rise up and say, no, it's not going to happen. And this is just one little part of the world, but I suspect this is something that's happening all over the world, and the people that are running things haven't yet realized it, or if they have, they don't know what to do.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after the break.
Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond-producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109-carat diamond, recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior. It is expected to sell in excess of $65 million US at Sotheby's, London, June 29th, with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rafe Mair. Rafe, do you feel that Quebec will be encouraged to have another separatism referendum?
Oh, I think it probably will. I don't think that they'll have it. If they do, I don't think it'll pass, because I honestly think, unless he was quoted again in something I read today, that Jacques Parizeau was absolutely right after the 95 referendum they lost. I never got mad at him, but he said it was the money and the ethnics that did it. And he was absolutely right. Quebec is no longer made up of habitants, the Pure Lane. They're in the minority now. More people are coming in from outside. The Quebecers hope that because they speak French, they're going to want to break away from Canada, but that isn't by any means necessarily so, and they just don't have the numbers. And that's why you see a Parti Québécois leadership going on right now, and only one is talking about having a referendum in the first years of the mandate. And you go back to René Lévesque's days and that sort of thing. I mean, that just wouldn't happen. So I think, yes, it'll stir up people. They'll take heart from it and so on. But I don't think that it makes it any more dangerous. Now, that's not to say that we don't always have a danger in Canada of this happening. I mean, Canada's made up of dangerous areas like that. But to directly answer your question, I don't think that it's going to mean separation by Quebec within the foreseeable future.
Well, remember back in the 80s, there was the Western Canada movement?
Oh, yeah, sure.
But now that oil isn't king anymore, maybe that quiets people down when you don't have a political or an economic club. But on the other hand, when things go bad, you can see why having such a diverse nation is a huge asset.
Oh, sure it is. But, one of the things that I think people are learning in Canada is Western Canada is not what they think it is. It's not the four Western provinces. British Columbia is very, very different. And you just mentioned one reason. We don't have the oil. Of course, neither does anybody else now. But we have not had that separate sort of existence. But we have a different history, different geography, a different background, different culture, and so on. So it always remains an area that, it's not going to separate tomorrow afternoon, but it's one of those places that you can't be sure isn't going to get some kind of an independence movement going in the next 25 or 30 years if things go along the way they are. But these things are cyclical, as you know, Jim. You go through long periods of time where nothing happens, and then all of a sudden everybody gets excited. So, I'm no good at predicting whether that's going to happen here or anywhere else, but I do know this, that the disenchantment of the average Joe with the establishment or the people that run his country is very, very strong now, and it's down to in the village area with councils all the way up to legislatures and parliaments, and somewhere along the line that'll either have to change because people will get better, or maybe time will pass and they'll think, how the hell, there's nothing I can do. But it's there right now, and I sense it's going to have its day.
If there's a Vancouver Island separatist movement, does that actually show disenchantment with the typical BC government official right now?
Well, this goes back to what I was saying a moment ago about Great Britain and France and so on. It's in your genes, really, in a way. Not that everybody goes back a long way in Vancouver Island, but Vancouver Island had a separate existence for a long part of our history. And if you've lived there for any length of time, I lived there for 5 years, and you feel it, you sense it. It is different. They feel differently. They look at the rest of British Columbia differently, and they did then and they do now. So there's always, I think, that undercurrent there that they haven't been fairly treated and so on. I think that's rubbish. I think they're fairly treated all right. But you don't have to have unfair treatment. You just got to be different and feel that your difference is not being acknowledged to get pissed off. And I think that's what's happening. But it's not a new thing. It will go away because there's absolutely no way they can last on their own, and they know it. And Vancouver Island isn't just Victoria and Parksville. There are all parts of it that don't want that, or haven't got that sort of sense. But it's there, and I think that's one of the reasons. It's kind of the monkey see, monkey do. Other people are doing it. Well, I think I'll do it too.
You always talked about the need for strong voices. We've lost one, not in the sense that they're dead or anything, but Ian Jessup, longtime legislative reporter, press secretary for several premiers, was a very strong voice on Victoria Radio. He's no longer on the air. That's
very sad. It really and truly is. I know Ian very well. broadcast with him back in the old CKNW days, and he's been kind enough to say that I was his mentor, and I don't know whether that's true or not, but it does acknowledge we've had a relationship for a long, long time, and Ian became a very, very good broadcaster. This is symptomatic in a sense of what we've been talking about, I think, Jim. The people in charge can't stand any sort of disagreement or dissent or anything that's going to make their lives more awkward. And they'll even lose money to attain that. And this isn't new. This is going to sound awful, but I'm going to say it anyway. The last time we had anybody who was standing up to the powers that be every day and shouting about it was me. And when 2005, when I got fired by 600 AM, no station replaced anybody with my type of broadcaster, or Webster's, or Pat Burns, or Bannerman's, or anybody like that. That just didn't happen, and it won't happen again. The reason it won't happen, I think, is that the advertisers, the money, just as we don't need it. We just don't have to do that anymore to make any money. We can make decent money as a radio station, just sailing along and doing pablum things. They like to blame it on the internet and all that sort of stuff. Well, you know and I know that's just rubbish. If they put out a better product, who in the hell is going to watch or fiddle around the internet if they really have something that they can listen to that they're going to enjoy? And that's just a pallid excuse. I mean, I'm on the internet probably 18 hours a day, and anytime I have a chance to listen or watch or do anything that's away from that, I'm doing it. So it's not the internet. It's just that radio no longer entertains, and they don't have to entertain. It started a long time ago, really, when you know, Edward R. Murrow, when his type was gone. It wasn't long before all the Edward R. Murrows were gone. And Jack Webster and people like that. They just have no longer been replaced. The media is so closely and tightly owned by such a small group of people. I don't even think they know themselves who owns it. But I'll get back to my favorite hobby horse right now. When you have the largest newspaper chain in Canada with a written, what I call, mutual masturbation agreement with the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, and they have, and I'll send it to anybody who wants it, when you have that going, when they're absolutely stone cold in bed with the oil companies, and the oil companies have got the governments by the you-know-whats, then you are not going to have anything remotely like free speech going out on the air. It just is not going to happen. And the thing, I guess, that I find particularly troubling, Jim, is that there really isn't a great outcry about that sort of thing. And, you know, when I reported some, I guess a year or so ago, and I'm sure others did it before me, I'm not trying to say the great I am, but I found out that the Vancouver province and Resource Works, who are touting the wood-fiber LNG plant, I found out that they were official named partners. And I thought, Christ, pardon my language, that can't be. I mean, no newspaper is going to allow that to happen. Well, they did, and it was there, and I wrote some articles on it, and it was sort of a ho-hum, so what? So I guess that is maybe indicative of the fact that the public doesn't expect anything of the media anymore, so they're not going to get themselves excited. But the fact remains there is really very little decent media left, certainly not in Canada. Even the Globe and Mail, which has, you know, one or two writers that are all right, it's pretty pallid stuff, and it's that way. And Ian is the victim of that, and Morris the pity for it. He was a very, very good broadcaster, and he had courage, he had guts. I think the thing that probably hurt him as much as anything is when he took Andrew Weaver apart last December in an interview over the Runner River thing, the IPPs and so on. He cut him to ribbons, and he made enemies. And I don't know whether suggest that Weaver complained. I think he probably did, but I don't know whether he did or not. But if you're doing that to the boys that count, and they haven't got the guts to go with it like we had to in our day, and they complain, then the radio stations just aren't going to put up with it. And I'll sort of end this little blurb by saying this, and you may remember this if you listen. I guess it was just a week before Ian went on air. I said, Ian, you've got to be careful. They're after your ass. You know, you can't go on being like this, frank and tough and holding feet to the fire. Your company is going to was going to fire you. And they did. And it's what can you say? I guess now I've got myself damn old. It doesn't matter anymore, but it does matter. It's very, very sad to see the things that we all held dear, like free, frank speech, in such trouble. Very quickly, I'll just mention one other thing. This has been seen coming for quite a while. We now are prepared to make rudeness a crime, not counseling people to kill people or hurt people. Just plain rudeness is now getting fines, and human resources organizations are fining employers for being rude and so on. Rudeness? Rudeness is at the very center of democracy, the very center of free speech. It's the right to be rude. And when you get down to that, this is a marvelous. Have I time for a quick little story?
You have time for everything, Rafe.
I think one of the great stories of rudeness, and one of the men who was very able, and actually the best rude people I've ever known were women, Margot Asquith and Dorothy Parker and Roosevelt Longworth and so on. But Winston Churchill stood up in Parliament one day. He hated Ramsay MacDonald, who was the Prime Minister. And he got on me and said, Mr. Speaker, when I was a little boy, the circus came to town, and they had an act called the Boneless Wonder. And I wanted to see the Boneless Wonder so badly, but my parents decided that was too ghastly a thing for a little boy to see. So I've been waiting, Mr. Speaker, until today to see the Boneless Wonder sitting across from me on the Treasury bench. And now today there would be a society of boneless wonders rise up. There would be calls for his resignation, fines, suspensions, and all the rest of it. But that was free speech. And it's gone down in history not as something that's a terrible thing, but something that's funny. And we're losing that. We're now being so nice to each other. And, oh, my God, did I say that wrong? Did I say him when I should have said him or her? Or I'm not saying that we shouldn't have de-sexed our language. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's now got to the point where you actually pause when you're talking and wondering whether you're going to say something that's going to offend anybody. I've got to tell you, I don't do that because, frankly, I'm too old to give a damn. But that's what you see happening, and you hear it when you talk to people. Be very, very careful what they say. I think that's pretty sad. I really do. Rudeness is not something that your mother and father encouraged, but it's part of free speech, a very important part of free speech. It's been a very seriously important part of free speech when free speech is under attack. And to have us now fining people and charging them and so on with saying things not because they're hurtful, because they're rude. I mean, hurtful in physical sense because they're rude. That tells us where we're at. It's sad.
In Germany, it's a $200 fine if you swear at your neighbor.
Oh, Lord. And there's a very good example of that. Good Lord. I mean, anybody that grew up in my time is just nauseated at the thought of the Holocaust. And when we found out about it and all the rest of it as young people in the teens, I mean, it changed our lives, and we became much, much different than our parents about Jews and blacks and all the rest of it. We became much more tolerant and understanding. Having said that, to think that somebody can go to jail for denying that there was ever a Holocaust just is absolutely insane. I mean, I can stand up, or I presume I could in Germany, I could stand up and say, there never was a Herr Schmidt, let's say, living across the street to sell bananas. I can say that, but I can stand up and say there never was an Adolf Hitler. I'm going to wind up in jail. Now, this is what happens if you're not careful and recognize that free speech means danger. It contains within it a premium that you're paying for free speech. That premium being that somebody's feelings is going to get hurt from time to time. That's part and parcel of it, but it's an important premium because if you don't pay it and you don't have that right, pretty soon you have placid language, and you also have people running all over you, and you don't have any chance to fight back. I often wonder these days what would have happened to men like Jonathan Swift in his day if he was trying to write things like A Modest Proposal or Gulliver's Travels. He'd wind up in jail for, I suppose, first of all, he'd get it for little men and then for horses and God knows what all, eating babies. Good Lord, what do you do about that? It's an important part of life, not something you applaud, not something you encourage your kids to do, but it's an important right to have. And to think that we're now losing that right is very, very scary to me, and it will be to a lot of other people when it really gets worse and they start to think about it.
And on a happier note, we'd just like to salute longtime BC broadcaster Red Robinson, getting the Order of BC. Long time coming, and congratulations.
Well, absolutely. Red's a great guy. He's a good friend of mine, and that's just great to hear. You know, I'll say just one thing quickly. The one thing about Red that not just because of this, but he's a great friend and so on, but Red went through the whole rock and roll era and all that sort of thing without any scandals, blemishes, marriage breakups, dope, or anything like that. He was never a goody two-shoes, but he was always a fine example to all the young people who listened to him, and he deserves this, and he deserves the Order of Canada. He's a fine guy.
Rafe, thank you so much for chatting with us.
My pleasure, Jim. Take care.
Take care yourself. My guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. Check out his website, rafeonline.com. You're listening to The Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. You can find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments or questions for the show can be emailed to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on The Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.